I'm a second year law student pursuing BBLLB honors. We had a very enlightening and thought-provoking session yesterday with you, in which we have got the glimpse of how does the system of checks and balances works under the Indian Constitution, and also about the recent issues ongoing. So before we begin with the questions, how is your experience at the MBJ?
Oh, here in Manipal University, this is my first visit. It's my second visit to Rajasthan. No, my third visit. Over the last 10 years, I think I've lived more in India than I have in the United States. But with all due respect to all the other beautiful states in India, Rajasthan is truly a jewel. And Manipal University is truly, my eyes are still taking in all the colors and the beauties of this campus.
Alright, so thank you so much for your insights. So we shall begin with the questions. So my first question to you is, by considering the recent issues, there have been debates over judiciary being more politically influenced in recent years. So do you think judiciary still upholds the balance envisioned by the constitutional forefathers in the country?
In the United States context. You know, it's interesting. I think judges, they do carry their own personal and political biases, but they're supposed to be objective. And I can think of numerous instances, including the current Supreme Court, where President Trump appointed 3 justices and they ruled against him. So this is what gives me hope, because I think in the constitutional structure, you have to have separation of powers. You know, the legislative branch makes the laws, the executive branch enforces the laws, the judiciary interprets the laws. But that third pillar, that independent judiciary, has to maintain its independence. But the whole thing falls apart unless you also have freedom of speech and freedom of press. But I think those elements of it, independent judiciary and freedom of speech, those are key elements. And even though we have a president right now with a very different personality, I don't know if he speaks or barks, but a lot of the things he talks about, he will be unable to accomplish. And I foresee that many of his policies, either they will not be agreed upon by the legislative branch or the judiciary is not going to support it. And we see recent examples even in the last week. So I'm hopeful.
Alright, sir. So what are your take on the recent issues where President Donald Trump have deported illegal immigrants there, and judiciary stayed that order? So what are your take on that?
Right, so candidate Donald Trump, he made these wild promises that there'd be millions of persons. He calls them illegal immigrants. I prefer to call them undocumented persons residing in the United States. He thought there'd be 20 or 30 million deported within the first couple of months. Well, how's that going? Not very well. You know, because, you know, even the undocumented, you know, there are certain procedures that they are entitled to under the Constitution. Now there have been hundreds, maybe a few thousands of persons with a criminal background that have been deported. And sadly, I know from firsthand experience that there are some undocumented workers who've been deported for trifle, small criminal acts. But by and large, it's not going to be the millions that he's talked about. It sounds good in the media. It sounds good to his supporters. I think it's dangerous rhetoric. It's not rhetoric that I like. I don't care for his approach. I don't care for his policies. But he is not going to be able to achieve what he said as a candidate.
Thank you for your insight, sir. So my next question to you is, we all are aware about the concept of separation of powers, which include the system of checks and balances under the US Constitution. And given these recent political shifts, do you think this framework is functioning as intended?
Well, we have to separate noise from reality. The separation of powers, the way it's set up under the Constitution, the checks and balances, it is intended to be inefficient. It's intended to be so there's a consensus that occurs from the people, or as our preamble say, we the people. You know, in US politics, the president has what is called a honeymoon. It only lasts like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 months, and I don't know how long Trump's is going to be. But again, I come back to the things he said as a candidate, he's not going to be able to achieve as a president, because there have already been a couple of instances now where the legislative branch, Congress, he has a slight majority. They have not gone 100% the way he wants. But the way it'll work too is that in 2 years from now there'll be midterm elections. And there's a very good chance that it switches from the Republican Party to the Democrats. And the president, he's what we call a lame duck president. He'll be termed out. He only has 4 years. He's already served 4 years. So I think that those political dynamics, which are embedded in the separation of powers doctrine, I think it's working. I don't like the noise. I don't like the rhetoric. But so far, so good.
Thank you so much, sir. So my next question to you is, as we know, Indian Constitution is significantly influenced by the US Constitution. Because of the features we have borrowed in the Indian Constitution, like fundamental rights, the concept of judicial review, yet both systems have evolved differently. So in your view, what are the most critical distinctions in how checks and balances operate in both nations?
That's a good question. You're correct in that we both are common law systems, so we borrowed from the Britishers, and we took the best elements that worked for us. In the case of the United States, it was a revolutionary idea to have a constitution because it's the oldest one. I think one obvious thing that I can think about is the one thing is that both nations have really value freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And if you read the United States Bill of Rights, which has the First Amendment freedom of speech, it reads almost an absolute freedom of speech, to be protected against the federal government, and then from the 14th Amendment through the state. The Indian Constitution has a similar phrase, but it says something like subject to public something, so it's qualified. But I would say in the United States, I would have to say if there's one thing that's very different, I think that the freedom of speech, it's closer to an absolute than it might be in India. I can protest in front of the White House with any kind of sign I want. I can say anything I want, and I'm not going to face intimidation. And it might be distasteful. It might even be vulgar. Or even if I were on a YouTube or if I had a website, I believe, in my observation, that these noisy Americans are just that. They're very, very noisy. They know that they have a very high level of protection of speech and press. Where I think in India, culturally, it's different. And also when we talk about India, we also have to talk about two countries, very diverse. One has a population of 340 million, and one has a population of 1.4. So obviously, these freedoms are going to be managed differently.
Thank you so much for your insight, sir. My next question to you is, US President have increasingly used executive orders to push policy agendas. Do you think this trend is expanding executive power beyond its constitutional limits?
Well, President Trump has signed, I think, 83 executive orders in the last 6 weeks, and they've come from they range, for example, from making government more efficient, and he sent off Elon Musk, an unelected person, to go through and look for waste and fraud and this and that. I think there's an overreach, and there are now examples where the federal courts have intervened and have stated just that if you're going to dismantle an agency, for example, Department of Education, which was created by Congress, the executive can't do that. And that, once again, comes down to the separation of powers. It's the judiciary that has been intervened from petitioners, has put a stay or injunction on some of these policies. And then there's some executive orders that seem just silly to me. For example, establishing English as the national language. This plays to his supporters, but in reality, it can't be executed. You think there's certain states in the United States where Spanish is the first language of 40% of the people. The states still do their regulations and laws. So if you were to get a driver's license in Arizona or Texas, even though the president signs an executive order that says English is the official language, for practical sense, and I think just from a human sense, those driver license exams will still be offered in Spanish. But I think that's very different between India and the United States, where here it's a unitary legal system. The United States, I like to say we have 51 legal systems. Each state has its own sets of state laws, statutes, and regulations. They might be very similar, but they're very different. And then you have, of course, the 51st legal system, which is the federal, which is superior. But these, I think these executive orders, all presidents have used them and misused them. I think in the case of Trump, I think about half of them are symbolic, don't have a lot of force, and I think some of the others are going to be ruled to be unconstitutional. Again, the importance of an independent judiciary. Now, this is me. Maybe it's hopeful thinking on my part, but I do really think that the judiciary will intervene when it's called to do so, to rein in this unfortunate trend of executive orders. Now, the reason why we have executive orders in the United States is because presidents of any stripe or political party, they become very impatient with all the work that's done in Congress. The bills that the presidents want to sign, it just takes so long to go through. So the president, using his authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to faithfully execute the laws, the president thinks that he or she somehow can meet the mandate expectations of the people by quickly doing some of the kind of express executive orders. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The Paris Climate Accords, for example, those were put into place by Obama. Trump came in, he did an executive order and removed it, and then Biden on his first day of office put us back in the Paris Climate Accords, and Trump on his first day got rid of it. And I think this sends a very unclear message to the world at large. Hey, United States, President, are you really serious? Can we trust you? Is this going to be the MO going forward, where every 4 years, willy-nilly, a president changes course? But we shall see.
I absolutely agree upon your insights, sir. So my last question to you is, for Indian student aspiring to pursue an LLM in US, what are the key academics and professional advantages of studying at Penn State Dickinson Law?
Okay, so let's look at the bigger picture. Although I'm obviously an advocate for Penn State Dickinson Law at Penn State University, I think any international exposure, opportunity to study abroad is a good one. I would be just as passionate if I represented the University of Helsinki or the University of Stockholm or Universidad del Norte in Colombia, some of our partner universities. But I think something that's unique about Penn State Dickinson Law is that we enjoy exceptional academics. We're consistently ranked in the top 75 QS, which has meaning around the world. But I think the other things that we have in our favor is I think a very warm faculty, a very friendly faculty who are very scholarly, who students know they can schedule any kind of appointment and discuss something that was in the lecture or in the discussion and follow up. Faculty is second. Third is diversity. At Penn State Dickinson Law, we've graduated 1,300 plus students from 103 countries over the last 10 years. We embrace diversity. In our faculty of 800 students, 1/4 are international students. And so by coming to Penn State Dickinson Law, you're going to be exposed to the American legal system and American culture, but you're going to meet people from around the world that you might not otherwise meet, even here in India. So the third would be diversity. Fourth, I think it's something that's a premium, is safety. I think the United States, by and large, is a safe place to be, but we're in that particular part of the country. If you left your iPhone on a table, it'll be there 3 days later. I think location, we're far enough, yet close enough to the big cities. We're 4 hours away from New York City, from Washington, D.C., and from Philadelphia. But we're in that unique campus environment, that idyllic campus environment where everything is 15 minutes away, whether it be the airport or whether it be your apartment or the library or the law school building. Those play a factor. And I think the last and most important factor that makes Penn State Dickinson Law unique is Penn State University has the largest active alumni network in the world. We have 800,000 active alumni. We have many more, but active alumni. So we become part of this network that extends around the world. So when I lecture and travel, whether it be in Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or Mongolia or Colombia, anywhere I go, not only am I meeting law school alumni, but I'm meeting alumni from all the other colleges, so you become part of something bigger, this thing called the alumni network. So I think in summary, it's the number one, academic reputation. Second is access to professors. Third is employability. Fourth is location. Fifth is safety. And then also diversity and alumni network. I think those are our key features.
Thank you for your insights and time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very insightful questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.